Welcome everyone. My name is Lewis Ryder-Jones. I am the Deputy Chief Executive at Scotland's International Development Alliance. I have the pleasure of chairing today's session on climate change and COVID-19, resilience against converging crises. The plan today is quite simple. We will be doing a very brief set of presentations from each of our three panelists, who I will introduce in a minute. To give you a flavour of the kind of things we're looking at and what the issues are from a few different perspectives when we think of the climate crisis and what that means in light of COVID-19. We will then break out into three separate breakout rooms where we will each be part of facilitated discussions with one of the three presenters for around 20 to 25 minutes. And then we will come back at the end for a plenary session for some feedback from each session, each breakout session. So without further ado, let me introduce our speakers for today. We are absolutely over the moon to have Dr. Blessings Kachale, Programme Officer at the Climate Challenge Programme Malawi. Blessings has worked extensively in international development in Malawi and in Scotland for over 20 years and has had a particular focus on child protection, livelihoods and public health. Blessings will be talking in a bit more depth about the Climate Change Programme Malawi, which is housed within SCIAF in Scotland and on the ground in Malawi. I think we've also, I hope, got her colleagues in Malawi on the call and also another colleague here in Scotland to help her out during that session. Second, we're also really over the moon to have the country director of WaterAid Bangladesh with us, Hasin Jahan. I was trying to work out exactly how many thousand miles that is, but it's safe to say it is thousands. And it's well into the evening in Bangladesh, so welcome Hasin. Hasin's widely recognized as a global leader in WASH. She has also got a particular interest in gender equality, youth empowerment, and using ICT to address social problems. So welcome Hasin. We're going to be hearing about the work that WaterAid are doing in Bangladesh and how that links to both the importance of resilience and building resilience in local communities to both COVID and the climate crisis. Finally, we are very happy that our very own, and I say very own because Dr. Simon Anderson is not only a senior research fellow at the International Institute of Environment and Development, but he is also the chair of the Alliance Board of Trustees and a colleague of many of the Alliance members through different work streams that he engages in. Simon works on gender equality, climate adaptation, and monitoring evaluation for learning in the Strategy and Learning Group at IIED. And since 1981, when he started his professional career in Peru as a livestock development officer, Simon has worked in universities, government and NGOs across the world, including Mexico, Nepal, Kenya, Ethiopia, Mozambique, and the UK. Simon joins us today from Edinburgh, and we've promised to make Simon's day better today as he got a little bit of bad news this morning from a little bit of domestic theft of a bicycle that he was particularly fond of. Let's be nice to Simon today. I just want to mention before we move on that we have help from Tristan Weller, who's a volunteer at the Alliance. He is managing the chat box today. If you have any issues technically, please put some messages in the chat box. And also he will and should have already, I can't see the chat box right now, popped in links to some of the notes and the slides that we're using today. I would like to first of all introduce Blessings to give us our first 3-minute pitch before we move on to the breakout sessions. Blessings.
Right, thank you. I'm going to talk about the Climate Challenge Programme Malawi. This program is a Scottish-funded initiative supporting rural communities which are particularly affected by the changing climate in southern Malawi. This is a community-led program which works with program participants to identify various effects of climate change their communities are facing and how they are adapting to these shocks. And the program is focusing mainly on vulnerable groups, women and girls. The CCPM operates in Chikwawa, Zomba, Machinga, and Balaka, and these districts are particularly faced with climate shocks as effects of climate change. Most of the populations are subsistence farmers who depend on rain-fed agriculture. The rainfall period, which lasts nearly 5 months from November to March, is in most cases not enough to support the rain-fed agriculture production. Usually, these districts are confronted with droughts, floods, and extreme weather events, which badly affect communities to grow adequate food to last them the entire year. At the start of the CCPM program, our local partners spent months, around about on average 5 months, helping participants using various participatory methodologies to identify problems they face as a result of climate shocks, identifying locally defined resilience mechanisms and supporting them, strengthen these adaptation solutions. Partners have ensured there was representation from vulnerable groups in these needs assessments, young people and persons with disabilities, and created female-only forums for issues which could not have been raised in mixed groups. The collaborative and interactive tools that they were used in these meetings built upon participants' local knowledge of their communities. These included a historic timeline tool outlining community history, including key weather events, and a hazard and risk analysis to explore key issues such as droughts, floods, pests, and soil erosion. This approach has allowed participants to take the lead in designing the interventions needed in their communities. A recent independent review found that this community-led approach created a strong sense of ownership among participants and helped improve access to food, water, and energy in climate-friendly and sustainable ways. Thanks to Scottish government who is funding this program, nearly 50,000 people have food access improved, and the communities have been provided with solar-powered and manual irrigation schemes, supporting over 500 farmers, mostly women who have been trained in sustainable organic farming using agroecology techniques. Before the CCPM, women and children previously spent hours, a maximum of 3 hours, fetching and clean water. But the CCPM has provided and rehabilitated 77 water points, supplying over 16,000 people with clean water. Also, 7 communities have 15 solar energy kiosks established to power their local businesses, such that businesses that were not previously there are now there, such as barber shops, shops with fridges to provide cold drinks to local communities, as well as tailoring and phone charging. Our partners also ensure participants understand their rights and empower them to speak up, especially climate justice rights. There are so far 333 women in leadership roles, providing a powerful example to young girls and protecting the environment by conserving river banks, planting trees, and creating local roles. The resilience these communities have developed in responding to climate challenges has also been shown during COVID-19. CCPM partners continue to work through radio broadcasts where messages of agroecology principles were transmitted to communities. More people than planned have received these messages. Climate justice talks have been recorded and aired on TV, while training sessions within communities were staggered and conducted outside to ensure social distancing. Communities also continued activities on their own when CCPM partners could not visit them due to COVID-19. Lead farmers and women leaders, including community leaders, were all trained in various roles and continued to provide backup support during COVID-19. CCPM communities have become more resilient to any disaster, be it climate emergency or this pandemic. The program is going into its 4th year with the generous support of the Scottish Government to embed the gains made, but also leave a lasting legacy of the CCPM program in these communities. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Blessings, for your short presentation. We'll be hearing more from Blessings and some of her colleagues in the breakout session in a few minutes. Our next short pitch to you all is from Hasin Jahan from WaterAid in Bangladesh. Hasin, I'm going to move your slides on as we discussed. Just let me know when you want me to do so.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. Next slide, please. According to the Climate Change Index, Bangladesh ranks 9th among the most vulnerable countries in the globe. Bangladesh is experiencing increase in frequency of the extreme events like floods, cyclones, etc. in the recent years. It also observes higher temperatures, shorten of the winter season, erratic rainfall leading to drying up the wetlands and degrading of ecosystems, and also substantial sea level rise leading to increase in soil salinity. In Bangladesh, over 35 million people across the coastal belt are severely facing the impacts of climate change. Next slide, please. Next slide. Drinking water is scarce in coastal belt. Women and men experience climate change very differently as gender inequalities persist. Women travel for few kilometers, which takes even few hours to collect water for drinking and domestic purposes. Women drop out from schools to help their mothers. They also experience sexual harassment while carrying water after dark. Use of saline water causes suffering from different diseases. Next slide. Diseases, next slide. Disasters destroy toilets and water facilities. Women like Begum are the worst sufferer who lack the capacity to rebuild toilet for ensuring their dignity and privacy. Next. Impact of COVID-19 coupled with back-to-back cyclones, Bulbul and Amphan, affected the coastal population by damaging their livelihood, infrastructure, and social life. Increased disease burden, having over 68,000 cases. About 7% people lost income due to COVID-19. Accessibility to community-based water and sanitation facilities has been risking spread of COVID-19. Next. Government's response was very limited to food as relief to the cyclone-affected people only to a limited extent, while COVID-19 remained almost unaddressed, putting challenges in health and water and sanitation sectors. WaterAid provided support for renovation of water and sanitation infrastructures and boost up hygiene awareness campaign as the first line of defense against COVID-19. WaterAid promotes youth engagement to create future climate leaders for sustaining the local initiatives and also works for policy advocacy to increase government's budget allocation for coastal region, and other relevant work. Thank you for your patience hearing.
Thank you, Hasin. That was great, really interesting. I'm really keen to find out more. I'm not sure if I'll be able to join that breakout session, so we'll be hoping to get lots more discussions and questions from everyone else in that part. Thanks so much. Finally, Simon, could you give us your brief introduction to what your group will look at?
Thanks, Lewis. I don't have any slides. I just want to go through a little bit of what climate proofing and its relation to climate justice is all about. Over 10 years ago, we started to realize that climate impacts, climate hazards were going to affect the effectiveness of development interventions at various levels. And so people started to look at how climate risks to development outcomes and impact could be assessed, and what could be done if the assessment showed that climate risks would reduce that effectiveness. This set of methods, which has been developed iteratively over the last decade, came to be known as climate proofing development. Realizing that climate risk is obviously an increasing hazard, realizing that we are learning more and more about climate vulnerability and the exposure of poorer groups and individuals, and that these two things tend to interact to multiply levels of risk to the people that we are very often wanting to work with through the development interventions. I think that tells us two things. Firstly, we need to be climate proofing our interventions across the different sectors of development. And we need to be doing it in a particular way that allows us to focus in on the most vulnerable, because in a sense, that is what the climate justice element of climate proofing is all about. It isn't sufficient just to proof the development intervention or the investment. It's important that that proofing leaves no one behind, so that we are not only addressing climate risk, but we're doing it in such a way that those most affected by those risks, those most affected by the risk now and into the future, the proofing is done such that the benefits reach those people. Now there's a set of methods which we can mention in the breakout group around climate risk assessment. And there are ways there then of addressing those risks, which are increasingly becoming used by development specialists. In the breakout session, we'll be looking at how we assess those risks, and also looking at particular examples. One illustration I just want to mention now is that following the severe earthquake in Kashmir, it was decided to climate proof the access to water for schools, and this was necessary, and this was possible because there was so much rebuilding going on after the earthquake, and that process not only achieved its purpose, which was to make water available for schools for different reasons, but it also had the knock-on impact of increasing significantly girls' attendance at schools. So climate proofing is like an insurance. It's to make sure that we achieve the development benefits we set out to do despite climate risks, but it can also have wide-ranging impacts if we do it properly and we do it in a risk-vulnerable, focused way. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Simon. Again, really interesting. Lots that we can follow up there in the breakout sessions. So we are going to now do exactly that. We're going to go into some breakout rooms. I have been a bit mean and to save time during those presentations, I have tried my hardest to split you all in the most equitable fashion possible into the 3 different breakout rooms. So to take away decision making and the time that might lose us. Tristan has also put the notes for each speaker's presentations and subsequent discussions in the chat box, which you can access, and I really hope you look at them. And the last thing I would say is that we're really keen to try and build some collaborative notes here. We want to make the most of technology and the fact that we can use one set of notes through a Google Doc. And Tristan has already popped that in the chat box, and he's just done it again. Please open that. We've split that up into the different sessions, and we're really trying to, at the end of today, within this very short session, come away with a short list of different things that we can go away and think about and explore more. There's no right or wrong answers to this, so anybody and anything that you feel you want to add in, whether be it a question, a point, a piece of experience that you've had, please put it in. If we can, it would be great if we could come away with some practical things to consider when we're thinking about climate and COVID resilience at any level of program, project, or otherwise. Any assessments of what's already been happening from your own experiences across the world, and examples of where things can be strengthened. I think that's something we need to be really thinking about as we move into a world beyond COVID-19, whenever that happens. So without further ado, I'm going to open the breakout rooms. I will be giving you all a 5-minute warning. The session presenters and their supporters will be taking you through some discussion questions, so please get involved. And please enjoy the 20 or so minutes you have with each session. See you back here very soon. Hello, folks. I see you're all, wow, went from 20 to 40 in a second. It's wonderful how changing room is so quick digitally. I think I have to start by apologizing for the brevity of the discussions. I think it's one of the strengths and weaknesses of a conference of this nature is that we can start conversations, but often each theme within each session, like the 3 discussions I was hearing as I popped into each breakout room, could have gone on all day, quite frankly. So apologies if there wasn't enough time to explore each of the presenters' themes in enough detail, but such is life with only 50-minute session. We are coming to the end. Unbelievably, that feels like it was about 5 minutes ago saying we were starting. Before we do so, I just want to remind you about the Google Doc that we had prepared for you. I realize it can get messy when lots of people are feeding into it, but don't be shy. Add your thoughts, add your questions, and I'm hoping now we can go to each group, and if you did nominate a rapporteur, and if you didn't, just someone can step forward, or the presenter, I'll let you choose, and give us a little bit of feedback on what was discussed, maybe a top takeaway or 1 or 2 takeaways that we can finish off with. So we'll start with Blessings group and CCPM. Blessings, or a rapporteur that you've nominated if it's not Blessings.
We didn't nominate, but I took some notes and stuff like that, so I'm happy to do it. I think just a couple of takeaways that Blessings and Maggie were talking about. A lot of the community-led approach from the CCPM, which has worked really well, was grounded in the fact that the partners spent 5 months working with communities and finding out the nature of their problems, what they want. So the length of time and investment is what really paid off in the long term. And also, it was interesting to hear that with the response to COVID is that even though when there was a lockdown, partners couldn't get out to the communities, a lot of the communities felt such a level of ownership, they continued the initiatives themselves without external support, which is a really positive sign. And the team out in Malawi did some really interesting things around TV and radio broadcasts because they weren't able to meet people in person. That then they were able to follow up with tech people phoning into radio shows from the communities to talk about, their experiences on the programme, and sharing information that way, which was really interesting.
Fantastic, thanks, Ian. I wonder if the group that was with Hasin managed to nominate a rapporteur, or someone can step forward.
I can do it, but happy for others in the group to pitch in. So maybe just a few key things that we discussed. We discussed biodiversity loss and climate, and how these two crises interrelate with each other, and via things such as nature-based solutions, and some of the multiple benefits that those can bring around the issues of water and climate and also other crises. We also discussed the need to build future leaders and work with the youth, which I think is a really important thing here. We discussed the need to increase budgets, that ultimately there needs to be more finance to protect if we are going to build community resilience globally. But I think the main thing that came through was localization, which has been also just mentioned by Ian, and I know is such a prominent part of the CCPM programme. But really that climate impacts and COVID impacts and many other vulnerabilities are so unique to the local situation for communities. And so if you combine that fact with the principle that we need our solutions to be community-led, then we really need to make sure that the finance which is available is adaptable to community needs. And if you just forgive me, I was about to make a point in the group before we get snatched back here about COP26, and I would just sort of highlight that when the conference does come to Glasgow next year, obviously a lot of attention will be paid to mitigation and to emissions reductions, but actually a huge part of the debate will be around adaptation and the issue of loss and damage, which really has direct relation to the things that we're discussing today. And I would just want to say that I think that conversations like this are really important to those debates at COP26, and I think that we should continue to have them in the run-up to the conference. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Ben. Yeah, I think I would second that view, and I think the climate justice discussion more generally is something that the public might not have framed in the way that some of us who live and work in this sector do, and there's possibly a lot of work in Scotland ahead of us to make sure that we talk about the climate crisis through that lens. I couldn't agree more. Lastly, we had a third group looking more at the climate proofing aspect that Simon had mentioned at the start. I wonder if someone from that group, if not Simon, can give us a roundup of some of the main takeaways from that discussion.
Simon, if you want me to jump in, I'll try and do it if you want me to.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Geraldine.
Okay, so so we were talking about climate proofing in a bit more detail and saying that an increasing proportion of development interventions are going to be affected by climate, but climate proofing isn't, it's not about trying to do it all at once. It's about kind of taking an incremental approach and trying to do it in a strategic way. We were talking about the need to look at kind of geographical areas, natural resource bases in the local context, needing historical information and future projections. And we had quite an interesting discussion on how to access that kind of information and what are the different kind of methods for doing that. Also the fact that we also need to consider where there are positive opportunities from climate risks. So it's not, the whole climate proofing thing isn't just about looking at the negative, it also includes looking at any positive aspects. What else? Oh yeah, I need to identify risks to people across different time horizons. And Simon gave an example of in Mozambique, a project in Mozambique in a semi-arid area where agriculture is probably going to be excluded as an activity. I can't remember the time frame, but basically their kind of climate proofing made them realise that really for their livelihoods and for their survival in the future, they're going to have to move out of agriculture. And then we had a bit of an exchange, as I say, just on this thing about how to access information. Local authorities produce a lot of information. They'll always have something. We spoke a little bit about difficulty in accessing it and needing to get that information onto databases and online so that people can easily pull it out. And then just at the end, I was talking a bit about satellite imagery, which is publicly available, which we've used in some of our work. But of course, again, the difficulty is having people who know how to interpret that information. That was some of what I captured anyway.
Thank you, Geraldine. That sounds like a fascinating discussion as well. And I mean, I think that idea of climate proofing being not something you do all in one go is really important. And I think that links back to conversations that we've had with members throughout the Alliance since our focus towards the COP began last year, around the need for the Alliance members and their partners to be taking an approach to climate that doesn't try and do everything in one go, but build towards a more climate friendly and climate sensitive approach to everything that they do, regardless of what their focus is. And it's certainly something we would be keen to take forward at the Alliance with and on behalf of our members. I'm aware the session is now officially ended, so I am going to stop sharing my screen, and hopefully you can see everyone's faces again, those of us who are on. The session for me has been really useful. For me, it's definitely the start of a discussion. I just want to highlight again that Google Doc, and it would be really great if those of you who had things to say and thoughts on what you've heard today can add those thoughts to the Google Doc, so we can build up a shared notes that can be sent round, not just the people who were part of the discussion today, but the wider conference participants, of which there are upwards on 300 involved today from across the world. I think now there is a conference break. There is a designated time for lunch for those of us who are planned to be here in the afternoon. We have a range of other sessions taking place after the lunch break, so please check the program and choose the session that you're most interested in. We also have a dedicated discussion thread on the platform for those of you who have managed to get into that. Please check that discussion thread out, and we will try and continue some of the discussions you had in your groups there as well. So I guess the main aim for this conference today is to try and make connections, try and recreate as best we can networking opportunities for people throughout this sector from different places in the world as well as in Scotland. And so making the most of the chat box functions, the discussion threads and the Google Docs is highly encouraged from all of us here at the Alliance. So it just leaves me to say thank you to our speakers, Hasin, Simon, and Blessings, and the support that they've had from their colleagues, and to all of you for joining this session. And I look forward to seeing you all later.